Have you ever looked up at a giant skyscraper and just wondered, how in the world does somebody get the money for that? Well, today we are pulling back the curtain. We're going to look at the exact playbook lenders use to decide how many millions or, yeah, even billions they're willing to risk on a big real estate deal. You ready? Let's dive in.
So let's kick things off with a question that gets right to the heart of it. Let's say you found the perfect building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. You've got the vision, you've got the drive, but you definitely don't have all the cash. So how do you convince a bank to write that massive check? Well, it turns out it's not some kind of magic, it's math. And it all boils down to just a few key numbers. All right, first up, let's tackle the easiest scenario. You're not building something from scratch. Nope. You're buying a building that's already up, it's running, it's got tenants, and it's already making money. For this situation, lenders have a favorite go-to tool to figure out their risk.
And that tool is called loan to value, or as you'll always hear it, LTV. This is really the bedrock of real estate finance, and it's a super straightforward idea. A lender looks at what the property is worth right now, today, in the current market, and they decide to lend you a certain percentage of that number. It's basically their number one shield against losing money.
And the formula? It's beautifully simple. It's just the loan amount divided by the property's value. So if a building is appraised and valued at $10 million and a lender's policy is a 70% LTV, well, they'll lend you $7 million. It's that simple. The key word here, the one to really focus on, is value. That's what a professional appraiser says it's worth today.
Let's make this real with an example. Say you want to buy that $10 million building. The bank comes back and says, our LTV on this is 65%. Okay, what does that mean? It means they're going to lend you $6.5 million. And the rest? Well, that's on you. That's $3.5 million is your equity. It's your skin in the game. And for the lender, that's their safety cushion if things go south. But, and this is important, not all buildings are created equal in a lender's eyes. As you can see here, they'll lend you a higher percentage, maybe 75%, on a nice, stable apartment building. Why? Well, because people always need a place to live, right? That income is pretty predictable. A hotel, on the other hand, that's way more volatile. It could be packed one night and half empty the next. So the risk is higher and the LTV is lower, maybe 60%. It always comes down to risk. Okay, so that's how it works for buying a finished building. But what if you've got a much grander vision? What if you're not just buying a skyscraper, you are going to build one from the ground up? Suddenly, that LTV metric doesn't really work anymore. I mean, how can you have a value for something that's just a patch of dirt? So lenders have to switch to a completely different tool. And that tool is called loan to cost, or LTC. Now, instead of looking at the property's current value, the lender looks at the total, all-in cost to make your vision a reality. This is the absolute key metric for any kind of construction or major renovation project. See, it's all about financing the future, not just buying the present. Now, the formula looks pretty similar, but look closely. There's one huge difference. The denominator changed from value to total project cost. And this is so crucial because we're not just talking about the purchase price anymore. We're talking about every single dollar it's going to take to get this project done. And believe me, total project cost is a big number. It's got the hard costs. That's the stuff you can touch, like concrete, steel, lumber. But then it also includes all the soft costs, things like architect fees, getting permits, legal bills, even the interest you have to pay on the loan during construction before it makes a single dime. It is, quite literally, everything. So let's look at this construction example. Your total budget, the whole shebang, is $20 million. The lender looks at your plans and agrees to a 70% LTC. That means they'll fund $14 million of your project costs. And you need to bring the other $6 million in equity. See, they're funding a piece of the entire journey, from an empty lot to a finished building.
Okay, now for the real test case. This is where it gets complicated. Just like in the real world, what happens when you're not just buying and you're not just building? You're kind of doing both. This is what we call a value-add deal. You buy an old building with a plan to fix it up. In this case, lenders have to use both metrics, LTV and LTC, to protect themselves.
So here's the scenario. You're buying an older building for $8 million. You've budgeted another $4 million for a total renovation. And your research shows that once it's all shiny and new, it's going to be worth a cool $18 million. So the big question is, how much will the bank actually lend you? So the lender puts on their first hat, their construction hat, and asks the first big question. What is my total risk on the cost of this project?
This is where they pull out their first metric.
So, looking at it purely through the lens of cost, they add the $8 million purchase price plus the $4 million renovation budget. That gives them a $12 million total project cost. If their internal rule says they can't go above a 70% LTC, then the max loan they can give you is $8.4 million. Okay, so that's number one. Let's put a pin in that.
But wait, they are not done yet. They also have to look into the future and ask, is this thing actually going to be worth what the developer says it will be? And this is where that second metric, LTV, comes roaring back into the picture.
So now they look at your projected future value, that $18 million number. Based on their rules for a finished, stabilized property, they might have a cap of, say, 65% LTV. Well, 65% of $18 million is $11.7 million. Uh-oh, so now we've got two completely different possible loan amounts.
And here we have it. The final showdown. The cost calculation, the LTC, says the loan should be $8.4 million. But the future value calculation, the LTV, says it could be as high as $11.7 million. So, which one do they choose? It's simple. They will always choose the lower, more conservative number. No exceptions. In this case, congratulations, you're getting $8.4 million. But hold on, we are still not quite done. These leverage metrics, LTV and LTC, they're only half the story. A lender has one more absolutely massive question they have to answer before they hand over a single dollar. Can this building actually generate enough cold, hard cash to pay the mortgage every month? And for that, they have two final reality checks. Both are based on something called net operating income, or NOI. Just think of NOI as the building's total rental income minus its day-to-day operating expenses like utilities and maintenance. First, they use debt yield for a quick snapshot of their return on the loan. But then they use debt service coverage ratio, or DSCR, and this one is the big one. It asks a simple, kind of brutal question. Does the property's annual income actually cover the annual mortgage payments with a healthy safety cushion left over? This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? LTV and LTC, they're all about hypothetical value, what a building might be worth. But cash flow? That's about reality. Cash flow is what pays the bills month in and month out and keeps a project from failing. If those cash flow numbers don't work, the deal is dead. Doesn't matter how good the LTV looks. So after running all of these different numbers and stress testing every single assumption, the lender finally gets to their final decision. You can see it's a process of just layering constraints on top of each other to find the single, safest, most defensible loan amount. You can think of it like a waterfall. First, they calculate the maximum loan they can make based on the project's cost. Then, they calculate the max loan based on its future value. And finally, they calculate the max loan that the property's actual cash flow can support. And the final loan amount they offer you? It is simply the lowest of those three numbers. At the end of the day, the most restrictive, most conservative metric always wins. And that really brings us to a final thought. Lenders are designed to be conservative. They structure every single deal to protect themselves, always choosing the safest path forward, which kind of begs the question, if the bank has built this fortress of metrics around their capital, where does the real risk in a massive real estate project actually end up? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining this explainer.